Story 1. Caught my wife cheating and she left me for dead. Then she stole thousands from me and tried to ruin my life. A 40-year-old male from DD with my cheating ex, a 39-year-old female. We were high school sweethearts at the end of her senior year. I had just graduated and met her working in a video store in a small suburb. We were close friends for about 6 months, and eventually it led to me getting up the courage to plant a kiss, and the rest, as they say, is history. Unfortunately, as this tale has found its way to the sub, we all know it didn't end well. I had never really had friends who cheated, never heard anyone talk about it, and I had no idea the amount of trauma that was on the way. It was a random occurrence that I had even found out. My folks were visiting, and my ex took off to go to a coworker wedding in another state. She had told me about the event about 2 weeks prior. My ex had a few friends that weren't mutual, nothing out of the ordinary, but there I was watching a movie with the folks and realized I misplaced my phone during the day. I was holding my iPad and browsing during the flick and tepidly shifted to the Find My iPhone feature. Married for 10 years, we had a lot of accounts tied together, and iTunes was one of them. Instead of my phone being first on the list, it was hers. Instead of being out of state, she was at a local hotel about an hour away that doubles as a popular brewery. They hold weddings there all the time, and I was sure that was it. I'd find her there with her coworkers around 8 p.m. I made it out to the hotel and couldn't find her anywhere. Looking for 2 hours, I narrowed the GPS to a certain wing. She wasn't in the restaurant, so I did my best Eddie Murphy impression. That's what I call it when you con your way into somewhere you shouldn't be or get free stuff, because Eddie was a master of that in all his early movies. I head to the front desk and say, "Gee, my sister was at that wedding earlier, and I'm afraid some guy took advantage of her because she's drunk. Can you give me the room number?" After slight hesitation and asking me to provide a phone number, they pointed me to the room. My heart raced as I turned a couple corners, now knowing what I was going to find. I knocked on the door and tried to channel Eddie again. "Room service?" I mentioned in the most pleasant tone I could muster while hiding my anger and rage. A male answered that I must have the wrong room. Immediately, my cover was blown. "I think I have the right effing room. How about you open up, so we can have a conversation?" My cheating spouse starts texting me. "Finally found out the jig is up," she says. She says she wants to talk in the morning and that she refuses to come out of the room. "Oh, okay. Stay the rest of the night with your lover." Got it. I linger for about an hour just to see if they'll come out. At this place, the restrooms are in the hallways, European style, but neither person emerged, and I gave up. I went and took photos of her car for some kind of proof and went home heartbroken to a sleepless night. She asked me to meet her in a public park where she knew there'd be people. She actually said that. "Oh, okay. Never ever laid a finger on you or raised my voice at you in 20 years. But now domestic violence is a concern." Making her wait, I get to the park a few minutes late and realize that my expectations are still off. Even though I got the coldest shoulder the night before, I was ready to make this work, to fix it. I came with a forgiving heart, expecting remorse. Surely, my wife of 10 to 11 years wouldn't gaslight our whole existence. She's in tears, says she's sorry. Looks like the whole time she's just sorry she was caught. Told her how I found out, and she smirked at it. We discussed her coming home, and I was both appalled and mesmerized to hear. "I just can't go back to the way things were. I'm so trapped there." Okay, so she's the victim, right? She spent 3 days in a hotel downtown, presumably just spending time with her lover, trying to decide if she should come back home. The AP was in a relationship too, has a 12-year-old son, and maybe that baggage was too much for her. She came home completely listless for a week, would hardly speak to me, demanded we sleep in separate bedrooms, claims she'll work on this but just needs space after all she's been through. She's done seeing the AP. We do the right thing and start marital counseling. Session 1, no further details come up. I ask for transparency, and I've been going nuts researching affairs on the internet. She just maintains she can't go back to the way things were, but in no way can verbalize why our life wasn't happy or fulfilling enough and what is meant by her statement. Luckily for me, the therapist spots something and poignantly asks, "You've ended the affair, right?" Shock and awe. She hadn't. "Well, I was going to call him and let him know, but I haven't yet." As I began the slow troll into the trickle truth, She confessed somewhat that she'd been with him for at least 1 year prior. It was unknown to me utterly and completely. Still happy in the bedroom, and she manipulated me with gifts. At one point, she gave me a watch that was engraved on the underside, "Loving you more every second." She'd remember to send me texts and call when out of town on business/affair frolicking. Eventually, I'm just a ball of tears and weighing my options of going to jail, just getting out of this crap right now, or sticking in the marriage I am so committed to. I love this woman with every ounce of my being. Session 2, transparency is abysmal. In fact, my wife has turned off location sharing on all devices and changed all her passwords to everything. Oh, okay. How dare I ask for such a thing when she's so damaged and in mourning? Cheating ex asks for an open relationship, and that'll fix everything. I'm appalled and desperate and just in a terrible mental state, and shamefully I agree. I think I secretly know that it's over, but don't know how to get my physical self to agree. The therapist corners her, saying she needs to break it off with the AP. Still no word on that, and that polyamory might not be healthy at this point in our relationship. My ex vows never to go back to therapy because that lady was mean to her. Okay, starting to see a pattern here. I cry every night, deep in terrible sobs. This woman who loved me and shared the utmost intimacy all of a sudden doesn't want anything to do with me. We pass each other around the house like ghosts of our former selves. I yell and scream at the world randomly from time to time. It's the darkest period I can recall in my life. We have sex, I think it's makeup sex, but when we're done, she says she just needed to get off and that we never really loved each other. Ouch. Okay, here I thought we had a great relationship that never lost its spark. We were intimate in the bedroom too, 2 to 4 times a week always. I make a move, maybe it's a mistake. I download Tinder and go on a couple dates. I actually tell the people I'm married and probably getting a divorce. I was super transparent before meeting up with these people. One told me if I finalized the divorce to give her a call because I'm a great guy. The other took me home to her bed. I wish I would have waited simply because this gave my ex firepower and mild justification for the affair. We'll get to that in a brief moment. I'm almost done with this crazy train. The same weekend, she goes on an overt camping trip with her AP. Tells me about it in the name of transparency. Meanwhile, doesn't validate anything else I'm asking about. It was this setup that made me continue to feel worthless and why I slept with a Tinder fling. By Monday, I've had enough. Astonishingly, I'm still willing to work through it and repair the marriage that isn't there. WS goes on a business trip, and at this point, I really have no idea what's going on. There's absolutely zero trust. I call her and demand, "You leave this man. You commit to loving me. You rebuild this trust immediately, or I'm leaving before you get home." She responded that she just wasn't sure she could do all those things. It is no longer a marriage but a disaster that needs a cleanup crew. While she's away, I pack all my necessary belongings, grab the dog, and move in with some friends. She really didn't think I'd do it. She called me sobbing that night. Why had I moved my stuff out? Total trip to crazy town. I told her she'd better act soon, that after nearly 2 months of dealing with this, she needed to make a decision. I could no longer live with her as part of this situation, and that time is expiring shortly. I told her more than likely in 2 months or less, I'd probably be firmly planted in the divorce camp. That she'd done nothing to work toward my side and done nothing but make abusive comments with her selfishness and endless need to be validated by men. She responded to this by telling me it was my fault for finding out about the affair. In her words, she wasn't looking for a way out but would have played the good housewife role for the rest of our lives if I just wouldn't have found out. I was sickened and almost driven mad by what I heard on the phone. Who was this person I thought I knew, who I shared my life with, who valued me so little that I was a throwaway object or at most only there to plate her wants and desires? She backpedaled and exclaimed, "This could be a good thing. We grow into something new, and we'll go on dates together and be excited to see each other again. If it's meant to be, then we'll get back together." Seriously, what the F? Even in this state, I knew relationships are something you work at and that love is a practice, and I was getting none of that from this horrific shell of a human being. About a week later, I tried meeting up with her. She said she wanted to discuss the divorce. It really just ended up being her wanting to flirt with me and then control my advances. She'd say how much she cared about me, but if I tried to touch her leg, she'd say she wasn't ready for that yet. Since I had moved out, she insanely also moved out and was paying double rent by getting a nice city apartment just a couple blocks from the bar we happened to be at. When I offered to walk her home, she scoffed and said she'd be fine and also wasn't ready for me to see her new place. Oh, okay. So been your husband nearly 11 years, together for 20, and now I can't touch your leg or walk you home alone with the dog in my new rented room at my friend's. I bit the pillow hard and sobbed harder that night than ever in my life. It wasn't wants or desires this time, but I knew it was over, truly over. I knew the woman I loved was gone. Maybe the rose-tinted glasses were lifted, but I knew it would be in my best interest to never interact with this person again and cut them out of my life. I was devastated because I truly and deeply gave my love to this person and thought all these years it had been reciprocated. Update 1. As my therapist and many on here have told me, I was the lobster in a pot. I didn't see the red flags when she hated on my friends or told me her friends hated me. I didn't see the red flags when she'd buy me clothes and parade me like a trophy. Okay, well, I'm kind of fit and handsome. I didn't see the red flags when she started traveling endlessly for work, nor did I see them when I asked her how she really felt and if there was anything that could make our relationship better. Part of it is the eyes of love, and part of it was her unpleasant manipulation that I couldn't see until now. Nothing was ever enough for her, not my job, not our house we owned, not the work I did on the house. It was all a ruse that fit perfectly with my codependency. I wanted to fix things and to be good enough, and she was very capable at causing enough disaster and dangling enough carrots to keep me engaged. I wasn't looking to have love reciprocated, but to love her so much it was enough for both of us. With my head clear, I resolved that the divorce was going to happen, and with her crazy attitude, it meant I was filing all the paperwork. I wish I could end this mega rant here, but you've only seen the awakening this far. The claws are about to come out. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, and I felt like I was making the right decisions in my life. I'm surrounded by friends, moving forward and gaining some clarity. I've realized the trap that I was in and made a firm decision to not get back together. Ring. Oh, who could that be? It's my WS. We were supposed to meet for coffee to discuss the divorce and entangling paperwork. She tells me she can't make it at the designated time but to text her 2 hours later, and we can meet up. Fine, I follow suit, jumping through more hoops, and upon texting, she tells me she's up at the nearby family mountain cabin and that I should come up for the week and stay with her. Oh, okay. I'll just cast aside all my integrity and small amount of self-respect I just discovered to jump back in the sack. Hell no, we won't go. I declined the invitation after stating the importance of working through the divorce process. She gets flustered and somehow kind of angry that I'm not willing to drop everything in my life and run up to the cabin. I asked her what about the AP, and her response, as he broke up with her as soon as I was out of the picture. Karma is a fickle creature sometimes, I guess. We finally meet for coffee, and I bring all the documents. Gushing comments pour out from her about how good I look and how well I seem to be doing. Nope. I'm freaking devastated, and this isn't a game to me, lady. What's up? We covered the details about splitting up the house, of which she says she's entitled to more than half. I'm not to touch her $41,000, and as a compromise, I get to keep my business untouched that I worked my tail off on building for 10 years. I'm going to stay on her health care for the duration of the divorce and will tidy this situation up as fast as possible. As I turn to make my exit, she pursues and follows me to my car, murmuring about things. Spinning on my heel, I ask if she has anything to say for herself. Frantically, I'm searching for remorse, perhaps a splinter of a shred of the person I thought loved me. It spouts out in a phrase more akin to a question than an answer. I'm sorry for what? I retort. For I'm sorry for what I did. The words trailed off as if released by the smallest church mouse in Zootopia. It was a benign effort that wasn't of remorse in action but shell shock from being caught in a way. It was helpful. It let me know that my assumptions were now correct, and that I knew where I stood. She wasn't sad because of anything she did, only that she had lost me as an asset with her cover blown, and now one of this man back in her life who at one time would do absolutely anything for her. It was the only apology I would ever receive. She asks me what our narrative is going to be, and I paused, trying to discern the question. Yeah, like what are we going to tell people? What are we going to say happened? That maybe we just mutually decided to see other people or something. What's our story? Okay, holy crap, yeah, our story. Well, you can say whatever you want, but I'm absolutely going to tell the truth to anyone who will listen. That is what happened. You broke my heart. You stepped out on marriage and now you want your cake. I've had enough and I don't need to create a story to feel better about myself. Okay. The flood. I turn and walk away, and as soon as I cross the street, a train comes, ending our conversation. I immediately get in my car and text all her family about the end of the marriage and why it happened. No, for real, we're talking Wolverine claws. I felt good about shutting the door, knowing there was no healthy way to patch things up and realizing it wasn't a healthy relationship in the first place. As the divorce process took shape, other tragedies began to fall my way. I was hit with a full double-barrel shotgun right before D-Day, about 3 months earlier, when my WS was out on one of her trips for work or sensual affairs. Our house flooded on Super Bowl Sunday. I went to a friend's house and came home to find a half a foot of water in our garage. Supposedly, she was in Amsterdam where some field offices were, but when I called to tell her about the disaster, it sounded like she was right next door. Either way, she just starts yelling at me to fix it. Of course, that's what I'm doing. Had I been smart, I would have run to Home Depot the last few minutes they were open and grabbed a sump pump to drain the driveway. Luckily, our garage was attached to a finished basement and was the lowest point on the property. However, water has totally invaded the garage and almost breached the step-up to gain entry into the house. I call a friend who's a landscape architect and handy in kinds of ways. We fill sandbags until midnight, but record rain is thwarting us as we go. We've saved the property for a few minutes, but with record rainfall that year, it's about to crest through. We come up with an idea to siphon the water from the driveway into my basement utility room where the drain is. We grab 60-foot garden hoses, and I start pulling with my lungs to draw the water over. It works. Besides getting a mouthful of groundwater, I get a nice steady stream flowing to the drain at gallons per minute. The driveway doesn't recede, but it doesn't overflow anymore. This gave me some time to bail calf-deep water around the house using a shop vac. I pull up about 5 gallons at a time and heave it over. We have one gutter leaking, and instead of going to the French drain, it's pouring into the driveway. I start filling a huge garbage can that has to be emptied every 3 hours or it fills with rainwater. I'm soaked. I'm in the rain and water, and no sleep for 24 hours. When I do sleep, I set an alarm to get up and bail to make sure no damage happens. The next morning, I fly to Home Depot and grab an electric pump. It literally saves the day. This tiny $50 or less pump diverts over 3,000 gallons of water in an hour. In about 3 hours, it's completely moved the driveway down the street to run off. Yep, had nearly 9,000 gallons sitting on my driveway, a knee deep. The same day, I go into work and see my landlord for the business. He runs a construction company, and I lament my tale. He immediately calls his disaster team and sends home free industrial dehumidifiers to soak up any water from the drywall in the structure. I leave these running for a couple days. The pump is still going in the driveway when my WS comes home. She starts to tell me that I was stressing her out with this situation and should have waited to tell her when she got back. Oh, okay. Thought you'd want to know about possibly losing the house and almost causing $40,000 in potential damages. Then she proceeded to state that the pump in the driveway is like so embarrassing and that if I don't move it, she will. Mind you, it's still raining, still trying to flood the house, and my neighbors have even come over to offer help. I come home from a morning appointment and find the pump moved to the garage. What the F? Eventually, I get the gutter repaired, and it stops raining enough to let the water recede. About a week later, on the nose, I come down with an awful flu I can't shake on any regular spring Saturday. I start taking in movies and resting. Pneumonia. Mid-afternoon. My chest starts to really hurt and won't subside despite over-the-counter medication. I mention to my WS what's going on, and I think it's getting serious. Can't you take care of yourself? Well, I'm not driving you to the urgent care. I'll go with you, but I'm not driving. Fine, I'll drive myself to the hospital. Thanks for coming with me. That's so gracious of you, sweetie. I get to the ER at the hospital and get all checked in. When I arrive, they notice my oxygen has dipped a little bit, but nothing alarming. We wait for over 3 hours, and my chest is pounding. It's getting hard to breathe. My ex refuses to ask anyone to see me, so I stumble to the front desk and almost fall over. They say they'll get to me and put me in a wheelchair. Finally, someone comes and takes more vitals but don't really get to the root of the problem. I say, I think I have pneumonia. My chest hurts, and I can't breathe. They downplay it and say probably not, but move me to a stretcher in an unoccupied room. I wait about another hour, and at this point, I'm really confused and barely breathing. My ex is just staring at me with dagger eyes and totally unhelpful. I literally start yelling, "Help! Someone help me!" over and over again, much to this woman's grin. I don't care. I feel like I'm dying. I am dying. After about 3 to 5 minutes of this, someone comes and is upset that I'm yelling, but then agrees to look me over. Turns out my oxygen has dropped to around 50%, which is life-threatening on its own, and my blood has nearly turned septic. I have bacterial pneumonia. I most likely developed it when I swallowed the bit of groundwater in my mouth saving the house. She never thanked me. She actually said she deserved more than half of the house and should probably just take it all. After being put on all kinds of fluids, they gave me a morphine drip to help with the chest pains. With comfort, I go in and out of consciousness, and as I peer up from the stupor, I catch her gaze. This soulless human being looks back with eyes that wish I would have died right there. Life insurance would sure be a huge boon to this woman. We have million-dollar policies. It was then that I spotted it, the major red flag. I knew something was up, and even though I caught her accidentally, I started keeping records of things she'd say or people she'd say she was with. They didn't add up, and in my heart, I knew something was off. The icing on the cake was that the rounds of antibiotics I would take, combined with the stress of the divorce, among other things, wiped out my gut bacteria. I would spend the next year finding out that I have small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, SIBO. Update 2. Now back to the divorce in progress. I think that backstory is important because along with the previous conversations, it lays the groundwork to the events that would happen next. In brief detail, I'll enumerate them here for context. After our meeting where I was given the weakest attempt at an apology in the history of language, and I told her family about the affair, my ex set a few things in motion. First, she made a point to tell people who were acquaintances and her immediate family that I was a deadbeat, a non-contributor to the relationship emotionally and financially. She had said she always wanted kids and that I didn't, and that she was scared because I was borderline abusive. Because of this, I still either explain the situation or cut people out of my life who won't listen to my side of the story. The truth is the opposite, of course. She maintained for decades that she never wanted children, and any time I brought it up created a major fight. Her family took her side, of course, and I lost relationships that I thought were my family in the last 20 years. Nope, just went total no contact. Luckily, most of our friends who really knew us abandoned her and realized what she was doing. Once my ex heard about my gut bacteria and all my medical troubles, she called to say that we should be friends and that she would make sure I stayed on our insurance through her work. She asked to meet up again, and I declined, knowing she wanted to rekindle the feels. As soon as I hung up, she began forging documents and turned in a letter of legal separation to HR to ban me from insurance. Rapidly, I found out at various doctor's appointments something was wrong with my coverage. All they would tell me is the policy was canceled. I did my best to get Cobra insurance, but they could never activate it, even though I was willing to fork over the $800 a month. It was a nightmare paying out of pocket and calling back and forth. I would call my ex, and she would lament that she had no idea what was going on. Eventually, I got the right person at HR, and they told me they couldn't set up Cobra because they were looking for the judge who signed the legal separation documents my ex submitted. Appalled, further devastated, I asked them to define exactly what they meant. My ex had forged a court document, signed a false name where the judge's credentials would go, and submitted it to HR to illegally remove me from insurance pre-divorce. I exclaimed that they'd never find the judge and what they were holding was fraudulent. We had never been in court together or filed any legal document of separation. OMG, HR panicked like you've never seen and retroactively gave me back my insurance for all the time lost. That's also why I couldn't get the Cobra insurance, because they were waiting for this imaginary judge to confirm the legality of it all. I texted my ex, furious, that she'd better call HR and hasten the process, and she played dumb. Well, we are separated. I just don't want to do anything illegal. Such BS. We'd meet a week later, and she'd hand me Cobra documents in my lawyer's office to feign offering help after the fact. She sold the house. Good for her, except she sold it out from under me. She signed my name on all the documents and never even gave me the final amount. I had to find out through my lawyer and the discovery process. Yeah, that hurt too. She tried to attack my business and only left it alone because I said I'd go after her $41,000. In hindsight, I wish I would have. Her retirement fund was basically our retirement fund, and there were conversations like, I'd buy all the groceries because she was making contributions to our future. Being self-employed, my job didn't have that feature. While I was saving for retirement, it wasn't the match to account she had the privilege of building. She was totally ready to devastate my business too, but fortunately for me, she was too cheap to hire a lawyer, and mine protected my assets and let her know that any judge would let me keep it and take her $400,000 if I wanted it. To this day, she has continued to tell people I never wanted kids, and my poor mother just tears up at that fact because she knows it was the other way around. In further attempt to prove her ridiculous narrative, she is now pregnant with the AP's kid. That's right, they're still together, even though she told me they had separated when we did. Turns out she waited about 6 months and then introduced this guy to the family as the new beau. He's an improv comic hobbyist, but he works a day job, and that's where they met, through her work. I found all this out because one of his friends FB cyberstalked me and just sent me the nicest message saying he was sorry about everything and that they're both disgusting people. This April, yes, 2 years later, I see these weird charges from the IRS to the tune of $112,000 go through my bank account. The numbers don't make sense, and I call the bank and my accountant. You guessed it, my dearly departed ex used my checking account to pay off her taxes. Oopsies. I give her 24 hours to return the funds, or I'm claiming fraudulent charges. In hindsight, I wish I would have and let the IRS penalize her into oblivion for it. We texted back and forth. She won't apologize for it, of course, and asks why I'm so upset. It gets really stupid, and I finally declare that I know who the AP is and maybe his friend shouldn't contact me online. She doesn't say anything about this situation, and the only response I ever receive is, "Who have you been talking to?" All this, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Besides this person I cared deeply about at one point in my life, trying to invoke wrath and scorn to the limits of human tolerance, I'm here today to tell you I made it. Not only did I survive all this because I'm a champ, but I'm better off for it. The most obvious thing is you, the Redditor, are probably as sick and disgusted with this lady as I am. Human beings like this shouldn't be alive, and they certainly shouldn't bear children. This journey became so much more than that and has vaulted me to a new level of growth. I'm ecstatic about it. Shortly after beginning therapy, I discovered that I am a fixer. I grew up in a home where I was devalued, and my spouse fit right into that mold like a jigsaw piece. Felt like home. All her unquenchable demands and hoops to jump through. I was always shifting myself and trying to be the person I thought would make her happy while never being true to myself. Clearly, that strategy didn't work and set me up for failure. Laid out here because I was donating love without ever having concern for receiving it in return. One of the toughest lessons I had to walk through was dividing my ex from my own self-worth. Someone else here recently made a post, and it clicked for me. I had loved her for so long and so truly that I had prescribed a certain amount of my own self-worth from our relationship. When that was severed, I unknowingly felt like my value had diminished, that I needed to prove myself to my ex, or somehow I was worth more when she was with me. What a tragic statement. I couldn't even put my finger on that until recently. Not knowing myself, I never learned to be comfortable in my wants, goals, and desires. I never learned to be comfortable in my accomplishments and my missteps. Late to this party, I never learned what my value to others could possibly be and just buried it all under the guise of trying to be good enough for others to like me. I was always outgoing and socially fun, but it didn't come from the right place. Now I can see the red flags in people. I understand what I bring to the table and what I want in this world. In the past year, I have grown so much in all these regards. I've discovered who my true friends and family are, and I'm beyond words with how much I appreciate them in my life. I met someone, a fine woman who has her priorities in the right place. We love each other in a full reciprocated way. She shares my accomplishments with pride and shoulders the burden of obstacles together. She treats those around her, including me, with empathy and kindness on a foundation of strong resolve. Under these values, I feel truly blessed to know her and continue life's adventure with this young, passionate woman. We recently bought a camper van, and for my 40th birthday, are taking a cross-country road trip. It's all I could ask for and more because it's filled with nuance that I would be incapable of knowing to ask for in my previous relationship. I could leave a rant as long as this mini novel here on all the simple and beautiful gestures she has bestowed on me in the past year. My business has grown by leaps and bounds. I'm free to make decisions about it without fear of shame or scorn for my partner. I'm also able to take pride in what I've created, and I can work on it as ardently as I want or take a break and let my staff handle the day-to-day if I choose. It's a great place to be and far better than it really was a few years ago when I thought I was in a happy marriage. For the first time in 30 years, I'm about to celebrate and enjoy my own birthday. It seems so small when I write it out, but it's a major milestone for me to accept who I am and be content in that. If you read all this, bless your heart and curiosity, and the support you're giving in allowing me to share this openly and freely. I'm not sure if this post will help anyone, but it helped me in the cathartic process of shedding the betrayal caused by a human monster. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My ex-girlfriend showed up to my doorstep 7 months pregnant. She is asking me to marry her. This is going to be a long one because there's a lot of background to discuss first. Let me tell you guys a little about my ex-girlfriend, Debbie. Debbie, 29F, now 22 when we were together, and I were together for 4 years. We met in college and stayed together throughout. After we finished school, we got an apartment together. We lived together for 1 year. Then she ended our relationship very quickly and did not explain why. Debbie was a year older than me and a senior in college, so I was too shy to go talk to her, and she was the one who had to initiate the relationship. She asked me out. She said, "I love you," first after 6 months of being together, and she is the one who suggested that we move in together after college. She was a wonderful girlfriend. She was just very insecure. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was because I never really took initiative in the relationship or something similar. But she was just always very insecure and jealous, and she would hate it when I spoke to other girls, no matter who they were. So, after a couple of fights, I cut off all my friends who happened to be women because Debbie was more important to me than being friends with other women. And it wasn't just friends from college who I stopped talking to, but I also stopped speaking to my school friends who had been friends with me for more than 5 years at that point. I am back to talking to them because Debbie is not in my life anymore, and my wife is cool with my friends regardless of gender. But back then, I was just friends with my guy friends, and I wasn't even allowed to go out with them to have a boys' night because Debbie believed that it would just be an excuse for us to all go to bars, get wasted, and pick up girls. I didn't think it was fair to me because she had forbidden me from seeing anyone without her because of how insecure she was, but I couldn't see how wrong it all was because I was too in love with her, and I felt like she was too. She would tell me all the time about how much she loved me and said that she couldn't live without me. She couldn't imagine a future without me and whatnot. So I stayed despite everything because I wanted to marry her and be with her. That's all I wanted. But with time, it became more and more difficult to stay with her since she just kept getting more suspicious and weirder about me. By the time we were living together, I couldn't do anything without her breathing down my neck. She would check my phone all the time. She would monitor my movements, and if I didn't update her on my location at all times, then she would threaten to lock me out when I came back home. So, by now, you guys have some idea about how toxic our relationship had turned by the time we broke up. I still somehow found it in me to stay with her, but then, surprisingly, she is the one who broke up with me, and it was over something insane because it was just a small misunderstanding that led to our breakup. One day, my sister visited me without announcing her visit, which she usually did. Debbie wasn't at home when my sister, Lauren, 33, female, dropped by. Debbie was at a friend's place because she was allowed to meet her friends, and I wasn't allowed to suspect her anyhow. Lauren surprised me by dropping by unannounced, and I was so surprised to see her that I didn't even text Debbie to tell her that Lauren had come over, which I would have usually done. We got to talking and we spent around 2 hours together at home. But then, all of a sudden, she received a call from her boss and had to leave to go back to work urgently. The thing that caused my breakup was, unfortunately, the lipstick that Lauren had left behind, which she had taken out to reapply it before she headed back to work. She was in a rush to leave, so she forgot it on the couch, and it was so small that I didn't notice it either. Then, Debbie came back home a little after Lauren left, and she seemed happy until she found the little lipstick. I still remember it as clear as day. She sat on the couch and sprang back up as soon as she sat, then grabbed the lipstick that she had sat down on, and I instantly knew that I was screwed because there was no way in hell that she was going to let this one go so easily. I tried to downplay it and told her the truth instantly. I told her that Lauren had come over to visit during her lunch hours and she had taken out the lipstick to reapply it because she had to go back to work. I explained this to her. She was rushing to go back home, so she had forgotten to put it back in her purse. But Debbie wasn't accepting any of my explanation. She just completely lost it when I told her Lauren had come over. "You're lying," she screamed at me. "There's no way your sister was here. You are making this up because you had some girl over here." I tried to remain calm and reason with her. I swore that I was telling you the truth. Why would I lie about this? Lauren stopped by unexpectedly during her lunch break. That Vassar lipstick she left behind. Debbie didn't believe me at all. She picked up a glass from the coffee table and hurled it across the room, shattering it against the wall. She told me that I was a liar and a cheat and that she had wasted 4 years of her life with me. I told her that she was acting completely insane. I told her that I was not lying and had never lied to her, but she wasn't listening at all. The screaming insults just kept flying, calling me every vile name imaginable. I had never seen her in such a blind rage before. At one point, she even hurled her car keys at me, which thankfully missed and hit the wall instead. After nearly an hour of this intense back-and-forth screaming match with no chance to get a word in or diffuse the situation, Debbie finally hit me with the ultimatum. She told me to get out of her apartment that night. She told me that she was done with me and that it was over. I just stood there stunned for a moment. Was she seriously ending our 4-year relationship over this bizarre misunderstanding? But the crazy look in her eyes showed she absolutely meant it. Seeing no other options, I went to our bedroom to start packing my belongings into a couple of suitcases and boxes. I gathered everything I could take with me. I couldn't believe this was how it was ending with Debbie after 4 years together and over something so completely stupid. Within a couple of hours, all my stuff was packed up, and I said one last goodbye, begging for her to reconsider and give me a chance to properly explain and make things right. But she just coldly told me to leave and never contact her again before slamming the door on my face. I felt devastated. I wound up crashing on a friend's couch for the next couple of weeks in an absolute shock and depression. I could barely eat or sleep. I just lied there replaying every memory with Debbie over and over in my mind. All the good times, all the laughs, all the intimacy, and talks of spending our lives together. It was all over in an instant because of her jealousy and refusal to listen to reason. I tried calling her dozens of times to no avail. She blocked my number in all social media. Text messages went unread. At one point, I even went back to the apartment and banged on the door for nearly an hour before giving up and leaving a handwritten letter pleading for her to let me XP everything. When that failed, I reached out to Lauren and asked if she could try talking some sense into Debbie since I had told her about the whole innocent situation. But Debbie instantly accused my sister of lying to cover for me as well. "You were probably in on it together," she apparently screamed before hanging up on Lauren. I felt so hopeless and like my entire world had shattered into a million pieces. How could someone I loved more than anything, who claimed to love me just as deeply, throw away years of commitment and perseverance over one small meaningless incident? More importantly, how could she flat out refuse to let me explain the truth and work through it? Didn't our relationship and my love mean anything to her at all? As the weeks dragged on, I knew I had to try and move forward, as impossible as that seemed. With the support of friends and family, I eventually pulled myself out of that dark spiral. I forced myself to start going through the motions of daily life again. Getting out of the house, looking for a job, making attempts to casually date, though my heart wasn't in it at all. Little by little, the clouds started to lift, but I will never forget the deep emotional trauma of having years erased in a blind fury without any chance for explanation or reconciliation. It was one of the most excruciating, painful experiences of my life and really shook my faith in love for a long time. I just hoped that eventually, the scars would heal enough to open my heart again to someone worthy of the trust and commitment I had for Debbie. Update. It took several very long and painful months, but I finally started feeling like myself again after the devastating breakup with Debbie. With the love and support of my friends and family, especially my sister Lauren, the cloud of depression slowly began to lift. Then, one random day, around 7 months after the horrible blow-up with Debbie, she was standing before me with a very obvious baby bump. She looked to be around 7 months pregnant. I was completely caught off guard. Rather than any sort of greeting, she just came right out with it in an accusatory tone that she was pregnant and it was mine. I was shocked. How is that even possible? We broke up months ago. She said that she got pregnant right before the whole blow-up, so the baby is definitely mine, as per her. I didn't want to believe what she was saying. No way it was mine. But she instantly cut me off, that familiar anger flaring up. Don't even try denying it. I know for a fact the math lines up, and you were the only guy I was sleeping with back then, so man up and take responsibility for once. If what she was saying was true, my life was about to change forever. I was going to be a father. The thought was absolutely terrifying and thrilling all at once. I was stunned. I wanted to be sure that it was mine. Debbie said impatiently that yes, she was sure that the baby was mine. According to her, we had sex in like mid-August before she lost it and kicked me out. I suddenly remembered we did have one final intimate night together in mid-August, right before everything fell apart so disastrously. Could she actually be right about the dates lining up? If so, that meant we made this baby before the big blow-up. Debbie's tone suddenly softening to one of pleading. I was angry and stupid, but this is so much bigger. We made a child together, whether you like it or not, and I want us to be a real family now. I gaped at her in shock as she continued. That's why I'm here to ask you to marry me, and we can raise this baby the right way as parents who love each other like we used to. Just weeks ago, I assumed I would never see or hear from Debbie ever again after the traumatic way she ended things. And now here she was, very pregnant and proposing to me. I told her that I need time to process and think rationally about what's best. She instantly cut me off, getting angry again in an instant. What do you mean you need time? There's no time, you idiot. I'm 7 months pregnant with your damn kid. And we're going to get married right now so our child has a stable home. I deeply regretted ever dating someone that's irrationally volatile. Debbie jabbed her finger into my chest and said that if I won't marry her right now like a real man, she would take me to court and make sure I pay child support for the next 18 years, whether I was in that kid's life or not. She was damn serious. Debbie had completely lost her mind here. How could she be demanding I either marry her this instant or she'll financially drown me? This was total insanity. I told her to calm down and told her that this was way too much for me to process or make any rash decisions about. I said that I was not saying no. I was just saying I needed some reasonable time to think this through. Think this through? She exploded, seemingly having a mental breakdown right there in my doorway. There's no thinking needed. This is your kid, whether you accept it or not. I'm not giving you any kind of time. It's either you man up and marry me in the next week, or I'll see you in court. End of story. With that unbelievable outburst, Debbie turned and stormed off down the hallway, leaving me leaning against the door frame and feeling like I might actually vomit. After spending a couple of hours laying down, I attempted to look at things more rationally. I pulled out a calendar and started counting backward from Debbie's claimed due date in June and cross-referencing it to when we had our final intimate encounter in August before the nasty breakup. And that's when I realized Debbie had to be wrong. The dates didn't actually line up at all. Based on how far along she seemed to be, in fact, if my math was correct, she got pregnant at least a month or more after we stopped being intimate and went our separate ways, which meant the baby couldn't possibly be mine, like she was swearing up and down. I kept going over the dates again and again, trying to find any miscalculation that could make Debbie right, but I kept coming to the same conclusion. The timeline showed there was no way I was the father of this child. I felt a strange mix of relief that I wouldn't be an unprepared parent after all, but also frustration that Debbie seemed to be trying to dupe me in some way. When she showed up at my door again a week later, I was prepared to lay out the evidence and timelines to disprove her accusation that I fathered her child. I told her that I have looked at the timelines very closely based on the dates she gave me, and the reality is there's no way this baby was mine. The dates don't add up at all. She looked momentarily stunned before the anger returned full force. What the hell are you talking about? Of course, it's yours. I haven't been with anyone else for over a year before we broke up. I told her that that might be what she thought, but based on the due date, this kid had to have been conceived well after she and I went our separate ways. I would be happy to sit down and show her the math, but there's just no way this was my child. She shouted furiously, getting in my face. Just admit you knocked me up and be a damn man about this. I stood firm, refusing to be intimidated or allow her to bully me. I simply won't admit to something that's not true just because she wants it to be. If the dates matched up, I would absolutely take full responsibility, but they don't, so this baby cannot possibly be mine. Debbie kept ranting and raving at the top of her lungs, calling me every horrible name in the book, but I simply waited her out calmly until she was done with the tantrum and took a few deep breaths. She then glared at me through gritted teeth before spinning around and storming off again without another word. Her pride was too thick to admit any miscalculation or potential mistake. She seemed absolutely convinced she could bully and threaten me into just blindly accepting her claim. True to her word, I received papers from her lawyer a few weeks later, filing for child support, custody rights, and even reimbursement for prenatal childbirth costs since I was the father. I immediately contacted a lawyer of my own to fight this and present all the evidence disproving paternity. Over the next few months leading up to the birth, there were several court hearings and attempts to get an early paternity test, which Debbie actively fought against. She kept insisting she shouldn't have to prove anything since I was clearly the father. My lawyer had to keep tempering my anger at how determinately convinced she was trying to scam and defame me. When she finally had the baby in June, the judge immediately ordered a paternity test as a first priority before any other matters could proceed. Debbie kept ranting and raving right up until those test results came back a few weeks later. I'll never forget the look on her face when the judge opened the envelope and said, "Based on these certified lab results, it has been conclusively proven that Mr. Smith is not the father of this child." It was the same dumbstruck, slack-jawed expression of someone who had their entire personality and worldview shattered into a million pieces in an instant. She didn't say anything. She just shook her head repeatedly in disbelief. My name was fully cleared, exactly as I insisted it would be from the start, but there was no happiness or joy, just a sad unreality to the whole scenario. Part of me almost felt sorry for Debbie, watching a lifetime of delusions and fabrications crumble right before her. The judge immediately dismissed the case and all claims of custody or support against me. Debbie and her lawyer quickly ushered out of the courtroom in stunned silence. I don't know what she told people or how she explained the ruling, but I didn't really care either. Finally, after what seemed like a lifetime of accusations and drama, I was free and clear of any ties or wrongdoing connected to my toxic ex. It allowed me to take a deep breath and continue moving forward with my life without her insanity weighing me down anymore. Thankfully, I haven't heard a single peep from Debbie again since that day. I'm sure she's still trying to wrestle with the humiliation of having all her warped lies so conclusively exposed and the reality of being a single mother with an unknown father in the picture. As for me, I did everything I could to be the reasonable, rational one, despite her best efforts to drag me down. In the end, the truth prevailed. Now on to the next story. Story 3. They're not my kids and not my problem. So about a month ago, I discovered something that really turned my world upside down. It's like finding out you've been living in a movie, but not the fun kind. Both of my kids, who I love to bits, aren't biologically mine. They're the result of my wife's secret relationships. This wasn't just a sudden shock. I've had this weird, uneasy feeling in the back of my mind for quite some time. Let me take you back to 6 years ago, which was probably one of the best days of my life. My son was born and I was over the moon. It felt like everything in my life was falling into place perfectly. I was married to someone I considered not just my wife, but my best friend. We had this beautiful baby, and it seemed like life couldn't get any better. But as my son got older, a little voice in my head started whispering doubts. He just didn't have those little things I thought a mini-me would have. It wasn't about him being the spitting image of me, but, maybe having my smile or the way I laugh. But the more he grew, the less I saw any resemblance, which was weird, but not something I wanted to make a big deal about. After all, genetics can be a funny thing, and kids can take after distant relatives, right? But here's the thing, it wasn't just about looks. It's how things were with my wife that really started to add up and make me question everything. She'd tell me she was going to yoga class or a work meeting, but then I'd find out that's not where she went. And when I tried to piece together her day, there were these huge chunks of time that just didn't make sense. She'd brush it off or change the subject when I asked. And then there was this whole mystery about her job. I mean, it's normal for couples to talk about their day, maybe vent about a coworker or a funny thing that happened at the office, right? But nope, not with her. She made it clear that her work life was off limits to me. I couldn't chat with her colleagues or know much about her work. It felt like she had this whole separate life I wasn't a part of. All these little things, they didn't just bother me on their own. It was how they all came together, like pieces of a puzzle that finally showed the full picture. It was tough, really tough, to come to terms with the fact that the life I thought I had wasn't exactly real. It's been a journey trying to navigate this whole mess and figure out what comes next. Adding to the story, things got even more complicated when a close friend of hers called her out for being flirty with others. This kind of drama was the last thing I needed, especially since it started not long after our son was born. Her habit of bending the truth started to catch up with her. But despite all the red flags and warnings, I couldn't help but love her. I was head over heels, and every time she got caught in a lie, she'd swear up and down about her love for me. She was really good at making me believe that despite her tendency to lie and manipulate, she wasn't all bad. Fast forward to last year, she got pregnant again. Even with everything that had happened, a part of me held on to this tiny hope that maybe this child was mine. But the moment our daughter was born, it was clear as day she was of mixed race, which just didn't add up since both of us were not. That was the last straw. I couldn't bring myself to sign the birth certificate until a paternity test was done. And just as I feared, the test confirmed what I had suspected all along. Neither child was biologically mine. The day I got those results was the day I decided enough was enough. I filed for divorce, determined to step away from the mess that had become my family life. I knew walking away would be hard on my son. The thought of how it might affect him tore me up inside. I had always tried to be the best dad possible, despite the doubts and the chaos. It was a heartbreaking situation, realizing that stepping away might break his world apart. But I also knew I had to think about my own well-being and start picking up the pieces of my life. I poured every ounce of love and effort into being the dad my son deserved, giving more than I ever thought I could. But now, whenever I think about seeing him, I'm hit with so many mixed emotions. There's this deep disgust towards my ex-wife for putting us through all of this, disgust with myself for not listening to my gut feelings sooner, and this overwhelming sense of loss for the 6 years I dedicated to a family that was built on lies. Since the truth came out, I've faced a lot of harsh judgment. People have called me a monster for leaving my son. They can't see how complicated and painful the situation is for me. My ex hasn't made things any easier. She's tried to use our son to manipulate me into coming back, calling me at all hours, crying and begging me to return for his sake. The day I moved out was one of the hardest because she used him to try to make me feel guilty, showing me the impact of my departure as I was trying to pack up my life and leave. It seems like every time my son is mentioned, whether it's online or in person, I'm criticized and judged. People tell me that even though I'm not his biological dad, I'm still his father, and that's all that matters. But what I've painfully realized is that in everyone else's eyes, my feelings and the betrayal I've experienced don't matter because a child's needs are involved. The only real support I've received through all of this has come from my parents. Even my own siblings have turned against me, calling me horrible names for abandoning a child in such a situation. It's as if my own hurt and the sense of betrayal don't count for anything. The focus is all on the child, which I understand, but it leaves me feeling like I'm not allowed to feel devastated or lost. I know it is not his fault. I know that the man he called his father for his entire life just walked away. But why am I expected to man up? Why should I have to pretend everything is fine and I do not feel contempt for this entire situation? Why should I put my own life and feelings aside? I never was the boy's father. I loved him like one and honestly still do, but I would come to hate and contempt him if I had to play that role. I hate myself for not standing up and taking my own life back into my own hands. He is not my child, and even though it is not his fault, he is not my problem anymore. Now for the top of comments before reading the update. This story is crazy. The same thing happened to my dad about 3 years ago. He was married for a bit to a woman, had a son he was sure was his. She later gave birth to a girl, and he was certain that the girl wasn't his. Got a paternity test on both kids. Found out both were not his. He tried to keep parenting the boy for a while, but lost touch when his ex completely lost custody of both kids due to drug use, and the kids went with grandparents. Such a crazy story with so much pain. I only heard this from my mom, though. My dad has never volunteered this information up himself. It's actually surprisingly common for women to commit paternity fraud. France made it illegal for a man to get a paternity test without the consent of his wife. The official reasoning is very telling. Paternity tests were banned in France 15 years ago. If French customs intercept DNA samples or results in the mail, the perpetrators, in theory, risk up to a year in prison and a €15,000 fine. The French Council of State upheld the law on May 6, saying it did not want to upset the French regime of affiliation and that the intent of lawmakers was to preserve the peace of families. As a child that came from a marital affair, your feelings are valid. My mom was married to this dude called Jack, and they had my sister. Eventually, my mom cheated on Jack with my dad and got pregnant with me. Jack didn't find out until I was born, and it was obvious he wasn't my dad. He had basically black hair, while my mom has brown, and I was born blonde. He got a DNA test done, and once he found out, he left. He told my sister and my family that he couldn't look at me without being reminded I wasn't his child and that my mom cheated on him. I was too young to remember them being divorced. I just remember missing him. I don't remember how my sister took it, but I'll say this. I'd rather my mom and Jack get a divorce than them staying together, fueling the fire of a relationship that was drowning in unhappiness and resentment. It was the best choice for everyone in this situation in the long term. Not the whole thanks for your words thing. My dad's situation has always been a place of animosity and apathy in my life, and I'm glad I was able to talk about it here and potentially help someone who has a situation similar to my fame's. Be good people. Edit 1. I wanted to add this in case OPCs the reason it was a place of animosity and apathy was not because of their divorce. It was because I have never had any sort of relationship with my dad, and my mom never told me who he was. It seems like you truly care for these kids, and I very much doubt they will feel the way I did in the future. Edit 2. Yes, everyone, I know how genetics work and that it would be possible for me to be blonde if Jack was my father. There are other factors that contributed to him eventually getting me tested that combined with the aforementioned that led him there. Please stop trying to give me a biology lesson in the comments. It's appreciated but not needed. He had basically black hair while my mom has brown, and I was born blonde. Okay, but this is completely normal genetically. Lots of kids are born blonde and go darker later, and two dark-haired parents can easily have a light-haired kid if they've got some recessive genes kicking about, which they wouldn't necessarily know. It's the opposite to blonde or ginger parents having a dark-haired baby that's much rarer. Now for the update. Wow, this post certainly blew up. Guess airing my dirty laundry accomplished something. Anyway, I've seen a few common questions, so I'll just answer them here. 1. Her son knows the truth of why I left. I sat down and told him that I am not his father and that his mother lied to me and cheated on me. I made it clear I am not mad at him, that it is not his fault this is happening, and no matter what, I will still think he's an amazing kid. 2. Some are saying that I never loved him or was always looking for a way out. It's hard to convey emotions in a text post like this, and even harder to allow vitriolic hatred towards your wear of a wife decontextualized the last 6 years of your life. You can believe what you want, though. 3. I have a lawyer, and I'm not going to be paying child support or alimony. Last, though, for those who say I should stay in her son's life and be his father, that's not realistically possible. I do not hate him, but I have been cheated on, lied to, and used by a vile, self-centered person who has now called her children up in her lies and deceit. He is a casualty of her actions and blameless. However, it can never change the fact of the harsh reality we find ourselves in. I do hate him. I feel so sad when I think about how he feels, but all I see when I look at him is 6 years of my life I was lied to, 6 years of my life I was used, and 6 long years of built-up doubts and frustrations with a woman who used me. There is no putting aside my hatred to try and be in his life because the life I lived with him was nothing more than a facade cultivated by his mother. This is the harsh reality I find myself dealing with, and I simply cannot, in good faith, put myself or him through it any longer. Edit 3. Since I'm seeing many armchair lawyers in the comments saying this post is fake on grounds of what I said above, I will not reveal what state I live in, but I am currently going through a fun legal process called disestablishment of paternity. Won't shut up 90% of you who think Google makes you a lawyer, but at least I tried. Edit 4. This is going to be my last edit before I move on from this small little distraction I created for myself. First, I want to thank everyone for their kind words to me in the comments, the direct messages, and the chat. You have given me a bright day for the first time in a while. I wish I could reply to all of you, but I cannot thank you enough. Secondly, I have noticed many people criticizing the word I used very profusely to describe my soon-to-be ex. I want to just say the place I am now is one of the darkest I have been in my life. I see nothing but white-hot rage for the woman who ruined my life. Is what I said inappropriate? Is the word I used to describe her dehumanizing and vile? Yes, I will admit that, but I won't apologize for it. What I wrote here today was the truth of the world as it is for me right now. It is the raw, adulterated stream of consciousness of what man I am. I do not intend to try and get people to hate women or to push the misogynistic message about how women are terrible. That is not my goal here, and that is not the message of this post. I understand why people do not like the word I use here, and you know what? I accept that. It is a valid criticism of what I did here today. I came here today to simply find some outlet for the situation I find myself in, to mourn and deal with the complex and raw emotions that have torn me apart for the last month. A place where I can freely speak my mind. And you know what? I did that today. It was pretty alright thanks to you guys. Again, to everyone who showed me love and support, thank you from the bottom of my flawed heart. To those who came here disagreeing with me but showed me respect, thank you as well. After the shame and ridicule I face in my real life, the respect you showed me despite your disagreement was nice. So long and thank you. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My cousin and her mom accused me of stealing jewelry at her wedding. I didn't, and I plan on cutting them off. Hey Reddit, I'm in a tough spot and could really use some outside perspective on this situation. So, my cousin Emma and I have never been particularly close, but we've always been civil. When she got engaged in December 2022, I sent her a thoughtful present, which she thanked me for repeatedly. Fast forward to February, and Emma invited me to her wedding in April 2024. Living abroad and starting a new job, I made it clear that I needed advance notice to attend, and thankfully I managed to make it. Emma asked me to be part of her wedding entry, and despite our not being very close, I agreed, hoping it would help us build a better relationship. However, just a week before the wedding, I found out she'd been talking negatively about me and my career as a project manager. It stung, but I didn't want to cause drama before her big day, so I kept quiet. During the wedding weekend, I helped Emma get dressed for her Hindu ceremony, and her mom told me to leave the jewelry as she would handle it later. So I only packed away the bangles. The entry went smoothly, and I attended the reception without any complaints. However, after the wedding, I chose not to leave a gift, intending to address the hurtful comments privately after the festivities. Days later, Emma asked me about the missing jewelry, and I told her I hadn't touched it beyond what her mom instructed. Later that day, I saw Emma posting on Facebook about missing jewelry and implying that someone in the family might have taken it. I felt uneasy, especially since her mom and I were the only family members helping her get dressed. Then things escalated when her sister made comments on the post saying, "We didn't like her anyway." Her mom reached out to me asking about the bangle, which made me feel like they were singling me out. Even my grandmother called, further cementing that they may have discussed me as a suspect. Finally, another cousin messaged me saying the jewelry was found boxed up in a car, but Emma refuses to retract her accusations online because she's embarrassed. Feeling betrayed, I chose to cut Emma and her mom out of my life. I deleted them from my socials and blocked their numbers. Now, my grandma is upset, saying I was unfair for not explaining myself. So, Reddit, am I the jerk for cutting them off without explanation? Should I have handled the situation differently? Thanks for your insights. Update. I read through the majority of messages received, and I agree I should have confronted it last night. I called Grandma and Emma on three-way, asking about the jewelry that was conveniently found in a car. Emma said that wasn't for me to find out as she only told her mother and grandma. Obviously a lie because Jessica heard and passed it to me. She also lives abroad and isn't close to Emma. Grandma then said, "Well, it's material and it's found. We don't have a long time here. Let's all get along." I responded, "No, thank you. I needed a public apology because I blindly believed Emma and I had a good relationship. I even heard she made comments about my job, which I wanted to address after the wedding. Emma confirmed the comments about talking my job and her sister's comment, but is sticking to her guns about the jewelry. I mentioned to her I was posting on Facebook about the jewelry and will attach screenshots to it, and that I wanted nothing further to do with Emma since she was not remorseful and is proud of disliking me for whatever reason. Lesson learned. Thanks, everyone. Update 2. After consulting with an attorney friend and compiling all relevant evidence, including screenshots and messages, we took the step of sending a legal letter to my cousin. Additionally, I made a post on Facebook tagging family members, family friends who attended the event, the priest who officiated, and even her neighbors. Yep, my petty ass went the extra mile to bring awareness of the situation. Important announcement regarding Emma's wedding. Hello, everyone in the Brown family. I hope this message finds you well. I feel compelled to address a matter that has been weighing on my mind since Emma's wedding last April. Firstly, I want to express my gratitude to Emma for inviting me to be a part of her special day. It was an honor to participate, and I was genuinely touched by the opportunity. However, recent events have left me deeply disheartened. It has come to my attention that there have been discussions both prior to and following the wedding where unkind remarks were made about me and my profession. While this was hurtful, I chose to handle the situation delicately and intended to discuss it with Emma after the wedding to gain clarity. Despite the hurtful comments, I remained committed to supporting Emma on her wedding day. I assisted her with changing outfits and took care of her belongings as requested. Regrettably, shortly after the wedding, I was unfairly implicated in the disappearance of some jewelry. Subsequent discussions with Emma revealed that there were private conversations insinuating my involvement, which left me feeling unfairly targeted. It was only through the disclosure from a third party that the truth about the jewelry's whereabouts emerged. I confronted Emma about these revelations, hoping for resolution and understanding. However, her response was dismissive, and she refused to acknowledge the hurtful nature of her actions. Instead, she chose to maintain hurtful social media posts, causing further distress. In light of these events, I have made the decision to distance myself from Emma and her immediate family. My conscience is clear, and I refuse to tolerate such unjust treatment. Furthermore, I want to assure you all that I am taking the necessary steps to clear my name. I am in contact with legal counsel to draft a letter and seek exoneration from these false accusations. I share this message not out of spite or animosity, but to set the record straight and reclaim my integrity. P.S. The missing jewelry was found by her mother in the car for those interested in the details. I've compiled all relevant screenshots and supporting information in a Google Drive. Feel free to click the link to access it. The end. Thank you everyone who supported, gave advice, and comforted me. Looking forward to going on my vacation tomorrow while Emma spends the next few days dealing with this. Emma has still not rescinded those Facebook posts. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Stiff me on overtime. Cue the long, expensive revenge. This happened in the early 2000s when I joined a startup. We agreed on a salary and no paid overtime, and an evaluation in 3 months and then annually. Standard stuff, mostly. It was a very mediocre salary for the work, but I really liked the work itself, which was extremely interesting and challenging for me, even if the finances were so-so. I felt I learned a lot of skills which would be useful in the future. After 3 years and having 10 decent clients and a bunch of clients trying, and money rolling in, the talk turned to back pay and paid overtime, plus compensating for past overtime. At that point, around $50,000 in overtime had been accrued, which is a lot. Legally, it couldn't be back pay, so the talk was always of a discretionary bonus. Now, at this point, everyone is okay with this, myself included, and this was discussed in writing via company emails too, so I felt secure and that no bad will was in play. I felt the company should be able to afford the payment. Equally, I happily settle for equity at a discount, which is legally possible there if cash flow was an issue. The discussions about back pay, possible equity, and now started to drag on, and I was getting irked by this. In the end, I was made an offer of equity, which meant the company valuation was far beyond anything reasonable, in the hundreds of millions, and I'd get a minuscule stake, less than 0.01% of a company with 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of around 2 million. It was a full-on upgrade of sorts to stuff me out of money, and I didn't want to take that line down. To say I was furious was an understatement. Anyway, the day he made that offer, I handed in my resignation. This sent the chief technology officer into panic mode because the CEO had refused an updated contract, and I was still on a 1-month notice period, plus I had a lot of untaken paid leave. Basically, it meant I was walking out right then and there. So far, with that very same day, to the shock and surprise of everyone, I guess. The next day, I sent in an official registered letter requesting my overtime or back pay and received a negative response, and followed up with another detailed demand. This was also rejected because the bonus was discretionary, and there is no overtime. However, I've been seeking legal advice, and I understood that they don't have a leg to stand on if I am willing to pay for an attorney, as the liability in such matters is firmly and 100% on the employer. I was willing. You need to understand that going to a lawyer was very rare in those parts back then, so companies didn't generally expect this outcome. Things happen. It's changed. When going through the applicable laws with the attorney, I noticed there is a limitation of 7 years, so while my attorney was laying out what to do in order to get me my money, in a few weeks I just asked him, what if we wait until it's 6 years and 11 months after the transgression and then file demanding interest? I wanted this because the law stated that back pay is due at a 9% annual percentage rate above the base rate, 3.25% at that time, accrued daily for every day past the due date. We're looking at 12 to 12.5% compound daily annual percentage rate. The risk is that the company falls in that time, but I decided to take that risk. I sent one final letter stating that I expect all the owed and accrued amounts to date to be paid immediately. Of course, nothing happened for the next few years. Life rolled on. The company did grow and become a known player in the area. When the time came, I found an attorney and started the case. We get copies of all the communications, copies of the registered letters, and responded. The back pay demanded now, including interest, was $112,000. What I didn't know was that, in addition to this, there are fixed penalties for each instruction to perform uncompensated overtime. The total demand was something like $135,000. To say that the CEO, who was still CEO, lost his asterisk would be an understatement. I got a very verbally abusive phone call, which I dutifully recorded, as it wasn't completely unexpected and was added to the filing. The CEO fought or tried to, but when the judge heard the phone call, he took an immediate dim view. Reading through all the communication just put more nails in the defense's coffin. The judge just ruled and instructed the company to pay immediately and without delay, and also ordered the company to pay all my legal costs. They also got a full audit from the Department of Labor. The company paid up a week later. To add insult to injury, the evening of the court's decision, the CEO apparently got very drunk and crashed his car into another vehicle while drunk. He got a DUI conviction and lost his driving license for half a year, and his insurance refused to pay out for the damages to his vehicle, a brand new Mercedes S-Class, as he was drunk. All in all, a glorious day. Now for the advice, guys. Help me understand. Imagine you own the business. You have an employee who is driven and is performing consistently. His consistency has granted the company with constant cash flow. He's interested in the job. At what point would your mind be like, let's hoard everything for ourselves, including that which is legally payable to others? Is it just petty greediness? Even then, wouldn't it be in your selfish interest to let him be satisfied with the work to bring in more cash flow? How dare that underling think they are the reason for this company's success? Or the reason for even part of its success? And the reason for its success. This company would be nothing without me. I'm gonna screw that person just so they know their place. Too long. Didn't read. Narcissism and ego won't allow them to acknowledge anyone else's value. And psychopathic narcissists want to destroy anyone who takes the spotlight off of them. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Am I the a-hole for telling my BF that his daughter is not allowed in my apartment because she doesn't stop smuggling peanuts in? I can't have any contact with peanuts, and I am terrified of them due to some bad experience. I'm ending up in the hospital. I have my shots now on me all the time. It is not exactly airborne, but I could have irritation, and if it, for example, touched something that had been in contact with peanuts, I could have swollen eyes and itchy nose, and ingesting is fatal. She is 14 and has no respect whatsoever for my anxiety. My BF and I moved in, and she lives with us every other week now. I told my BF that I don't want her here because she is not respecting my boundaries, but that I understand that he doesn't want to live with me in that case. We could revert back to him being with me when he doesn't have his daughter. He got very upset because he said that he loved me and wanted a real relationship and to live in one home. So, I told him that maybe he should be with someone who isn't allergic. Then he thinks I am being very unfair. He said, well, she will probably hate the next one too, and the next because she wants her mom and me to be together again. So, it wasn't me specifically that she dislikes. I said that maybe he needs to take a break from dating then until she is on board. But he said that he couldn't be single just because his daughter wants him to. Before me, he was single for 6 years, and that wasn't good enough. Before we decided to move in together, we have done some trial living together, and never once did his daughter do anything about the nuts. But now, for 4 months, she has always peanuts with her. I don't know why she is doing this. I thought we were cool. She just smirks and says, maybe if you are so allergic, maybe you're not meant to survive. A stand-up comedy bit from Lou C.K. Update. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for really caring about a stranger with a dilemma. I was glad that I wasn't wrong in my guts. I told my BF that I wanted to break up. He was very sad and tried to reason with me. He suggested that we could live separately. His daughter will soon be an adult. I told him that being 18 doesn't guarantee that she leaves the nest nor that he stops being a father either. Anytime she could come across hardships and wants to move home, and she needs to find that home. She couldn't have it with me. And about living separately, while it is fine now and some few years ahead, what about the future? He was silent and listening to me. I felt overwhelmed because I love him. He said that the only way his daughter will be happy is when he is alone. She is in therapy, but she has not shown any regards for her father or his life. She seems to not see him as an individual with feelings. He is just a father. I didn't know what to tell him and just said that she probably needed time to grow up. Until he moves out, his daughter is not allowed to be in my apartment. She called and threw a tantrum about her father choosing me instead. That she has the right to live with her father every other week. And this shouldn't change. I didn't say anything. They need to fix this as a family. I am not a part of this family anymore. He rented his apartment for a year's contract, so I don't know how he will manage to find a new one or terminate the lease so he could move back to his old apartment. Anyway, he is staying here for a couple of months. I am very sad that this beautiful relationship has come to an end, but I need to think about myself now. Mini update. He has decided to move away for a while. He has spoken to his current tenants about getting back his apartment. They have 8 months left on the lease, but they're willing to move out in 6 if he paid them 2 months' rent, or they would pay for 4 instead of 6. He has agreed, but here's the thing. He is moving away in a month or so. He has been talking to his ex about her getting full custody indefinitely. I didn't want to interfere, but he said that he needed to teach his daughter a lesson because he is tired. I don't know what his plan is, but he seems to want to try this for some months, but tell his daughter it is indefinitely. She has been calling him all day, but he isn't answering her. He is not going to live here for 6 months. He is planning on taking work assignments in other cities, something he never did before. He is leaving in the end of this month or the first week of June. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My girlfriend has been having bizarre, secretive behavior while staying with my uncle. We're trying to figure out why. I, 23M, have been dating my girlfriend Sarah, 21F, for about a year. Things have been really good between us, and I care about her a lot. Last night, Sarah called me crying, saying her stepmom had kicked her out of the house with nowhere to go. Her stepmom is a real piece of work and has always hated Sarah. Sarah's dad is kind of a spineless person and didn't stand up for her. I live in a 4-bedroom apartment with 3 other guys, Mike, Chris, and Tony. We are all friends from college and split the rent and bills 4 ways. With 4 of us, space and money are pretty tight. When Sarah called me crying and homeless, I didn't even think twice about saying she could come stay with me for one night to have a roof over her head and figure things out. The guys weren't too thrilled when I sprung it on them last minute, but they reluctantly went along with it for one night. Sarah came over with just a backpack of clothes and essentials. She was so grateful to have a place to sleep. In the morning, though, the tension was obvious. Mike passive-aggressively asked how long Sarah would be staying with us while washing dishes way too loudly. Chris avoided eye contact, but I could tell he wasn't comfortable with the situation either. Tony was the only one who didn't give me crap about it, but didn't offer for Sarah to stay long-term either. I pulled Sarah aside and regretfully told her she couldn't stay another night. I felt awful doing it since she literally has nowhere else to go, but I can't just let her move in without my roommates being okay with it, and it was clear none of them wanted a long-term guest, let alone having her move in permanently. Sarah started crying loudly and saying she has no friends or family in the area to stay with. She doesn't have money for a motel. I suggested she go to a women's shelter, just temporarily until she can get on her feet and find a job in her own place, but she is terrified to go to a shelter. I really wanted to let her stay longer, but I can't risk messing things up with my living situation and friends. I'm locked into a lease with them, so Sarah gathered her stuff and left, still crying. I feel like a terrible boyfriend putting her out on the street when she is struggling, but I also shouldn't force my roommates to let her just move in without their permission. So Reddit, I'm here. I care about Sarah so much, but my hands were tied with the roommate situation. Did I do the right thing? Or should I have tried harder to let her stay and deal with the anger from my roommates? I'm so torn here. Update. After kicking my homeless girlfriend Sarah out of my apartment due to my roommates not being okay with her staying, I felt like a huge jerk. She was crying her eyes out with nowhere to go. I knew I had to try to help her more. I suggested we go look for a women's shelter nearby that she could stay at temporarily until getting back on her feet. Sarah was terrified of shelters, but agreed it was better than living on the streets. We spent the whole day going from shelter to shelter. It was an absolute nightmare. Every single one we went to was either full for the night already or had a sketchy or unsafe vibe to it that scared Sarah even more than being homeless. One shelter seemed okay from the outside, but when we went inside, it reeked of cigarette smoke, and a couple sketchy-looking dudes were creepily staring at Sarah. She squeezed my hand tightly and shook her head no for staying there. I didn't blame her one bit. By early evening, we were absolutely exhausted, both physically and mentally. We had struck out at 8 different shelters. A couple were truly terrifying places. I wouldn't let any woman stay there, homeless or not. Sarah was feeling hopeless and kept apologizing for being a burden on me. I kept assuring her she wasn't a burden at all. I just felt awful I couldn't offer her a place to stay with my roommate situation. We stopped at a park to catch our breath. That's when I saw someone approaching us. It was my Uncle Marcus. He is my dad's younger brother and has always been an awesome, kind, generous guy. Uncle Marcus made a beeline right for us. "Ricky, what are you doing in this park at this hour? And who is this lovely young lady?" he asked with a warm smile. I gave Uncle Marcus a hug and explained the situation with Sarah, that her stepmom had kicked her out. She had nowhere to go, and we had spent all day fruitlessly looking for a shelter she could stay at without feeling unsafe. Uncle Marcus's face turned serious as I recapped the terrible day. "Oh, son, you should have called me. Uncle Marcus said, shaking his head. He turned to Sarah sympathetically. A kind, beautiful young woman like you doesn't deserve to be mistreated like this or sleep on the streets. Sarah just nodded with tears in her eyes. Uncle Marcus could always make anyone feel cared about. He is that kind of guy. Now, I may have a solution here, Uncle Marcus said. You know, after your Aunt Marguerite passed last year, God rest her soul, I've been a little rattled, all alone in that big house of ours. I have a spare bedroom and bathroom that's barely been used since the kids moved out. I could see where he was going with this, and my eyes widened. Uncle Marcus smiled and kept talking. So, why doesn't this young lady just come stay at my house for a little while? He offered. Sarah's mouth fell open in shock. She finally found her voice. Oh, sir. Thank you so much, but I couldn't impose. Nonsense. Uncle Marcus cut her off. It will be great to have a little company again. As long as you crazy kids don't mind an old man's jokes every now and then. He laughed heartily. What do you say? No beautiful young lady should be homeless. Tears of relief filled Sarah's eyes. She looked at me, and I nodded enthusiastically, giving my thumbs up. This was perfect. I don't know how I will ever repay you, Sarah said, crying happily. Uncle Marcus waved his hand dismissively. No need to repay me, sweetie. Just don't give this knucklehead nephew of mine too hard a time. He winked at me. Come on now, bring your bag. My house is just a couple blocks over. I gave Uncle Marcus a big hug, overwhelmed with gratitude for him swooping in to help Sarah. What were the odds of randomly running into him here? But that is just how giving he has always been. On the walk to Uncle Marcus's house, Sarah looped her arm through mine and leaned her head on my shoulder. I can't believe how blessed I am for you to have such an amazing uncle, she said softly. Maybe there is a little good luck finally coming my way after all. I kissed the top of her head, just feeling so relieved that she would have a safe, comfortable place to stay because of Uncle Marcus's kindness. She wouldn't be on the streets or stuck in a sketchy shelter. I knew with Uncle Marcus looking out for her, everything would be okay. When we arrived at his house, Uncle Marcus got the spare room ready with fresh sheets, towels, and even put out some little snacks and toiletries for Sarah. He really did think of everything. There is no TV in that room, but you can watch whatever you want in the living room when I am not hogging the good shows, Uncle Marcus joked. Sarah couldn't stop thanking him, giving him a big hug. I pulled Uncle Marcus aside and thanked him profusely too, telling him I didn't know what I would have done if he didn't help out. He just shook his head humbly. We have to look out for each other, Ricky. I am just doing what I would want someone to do if it was my kid without a roof over their head. You be good to this girl and don't be a knucklehead, you hear? I assured him I would be a gentleman and that she was in great hands with him as Sarah and I headed to the spare room. Uncle Marcus called out, but not too good a gentleman if you know what I mean. He roared with laughter at his own joke. Yep, that's Uncle Marcus for you. As I gave Sarah a hug goodnight, she was beaming with relief and gratitude. You have no idea how much this means to me, how much your uncle's kindness means, she said, shining with happy tears after the nightmare of being homeless in those awful shelters. I have never felt so lucky. I assured her she deserved for things to finally go her way after the nightmare she had been through. I felt like a weight had been lifted too, knowing she had a safe place, all thanks to Uncle Marcus. Get some rest, babe. Maybe tomorrow will be a new, better day, I told her, kissing her forehead. Update. It's been over a month since my Uncle Marcus generously took my girlfriend Sarah in after her stepmom kicked her out and made her homeless. At first, everything seemed to be going really well with the living arrangement. Sarah was so relieved and grateful to have a safe, comfortable place to stay instead of being on the streets or stuck in a sketchy shelter. Those first couple of weeks, her mood was the brightest I had seen in a long time. Despite her crappy situation, she would come over to my apartment a few times a week, giving me big hugs and smiling from ear to ear. Sarah couldn't stop gushing about how amazing and kind Uncle Marcus was being, how he went out of his way to make her feel at home, cooked her delicious meals, and never made her feel like a burden at all. My uncle has always been one of the most selfless, giving people I know, so it made me really happy to see him and Sarah hit it off so well. I knew he would take good care of her, And it was a huge relief for me too after that first night of having to turn her away from my apartment due to roommate issues. The first few weeks, Sarah would update me on how she was job hunting and applying for places, plotting how to get back on her feet financially. She is incredibly smart and hardworking when she sets her mind to something. With Uncle Marcus's place as a safe landing spot, I knew it was just a matter of time until Sarah landed on her feet again. But then things started feeling a little off. Nothing too crazy at first, but little things I noticed that seemed unusual about Sarah's behavior and attitude. She stopped coming over to my place as frequently, claiming she didn't want to be a bother to me and my roommates, which was weird since we had all said she was welcome to hang out as long as she wasn't sleeping over. When Sarah did come over, she was, almost paranoid acting. She would flinch if one of my roommates walked by or shush me if I said something in a normal voice around them, like I would spill some big secret. More than once, I caught her looking over her shoulder suspiciously at my friends for no reason at all. Sarah also began blowing off or rescheduling our plans a lot more often. She had a million excuses why she couldn't grab dinner or see a movie, anything that involved leaving Uncle Marcus's house for too long. Her reasons never made much sense and seemed shifting every time. "Oh, I have just got so much homework for my online classes this week. Babe, let's do something next week. I am just so worn out from all my job applications today. Can I take a rain check?" Over time, the excuses stopped even making sense. More like she just didn't want to actually leave the house or be around anyone else besides Uncle Marcus. I finally called her on it one day. "Sarah, what's up with you lately? You have been acting kind of paranoid, like you don't even want to spend time with me anymore unless it is at my uncle's place. Is something going on?" She looked almost panicked for a moment, like I had called out some secret, but then Sarah laughed it off in a way that seemed too forced. "Don't be silly. I've just got a lot on my plate trying to get a job lined up. That's all. School stuff too. You know how it is." But I could tell she was lying through her teeth. Sarah has never been one to be interested in online classes or anything unless forced to. I decided to drop it, not trying to start a fight. Maybe she just really was that stressed looking for work. Over the next few weeks, though, Sarah's odd behavior continued, and then some. She was staying home with Uncle Marcus pretty much 24/7 at this point. I dropped by unannounced a few times, wanting to surprise her, but she didn't really seem fazed or happy to see me out of the blue. I would find them laughing and joking over some movie, or he would be cooking for her in the kitchen, and she would look cozy on the couch under a blanket, acting kinda couple-ish, honestly. But I tried not to read too much into it, not wanting to be that guy. The thing that really weirded me out, though, was how secretive Sarah became. Anytime I asked what she had been up to all day, she would freeze up and quickly change the subject or say she was studying in a way that seemed rehearsed. If she ever left her phone unattended and I saw any notifications pop up, Sarah would scramble to check them, almost frantic, clearing everything before I could even glance. And get this, a few times I caught Sarah in the most random parts of Uncle Marcus's house when she thought no one else was around, like curled up reading in a hallway nook upstairs or sitting on the closed toilet seat lid in the upstairs bathroom on her laptop, like she lived in there. Just bizarre stuff that didn't make sense. By far, the weirdest was when I went to use the downstairs half bath and heard hushed noises before I opened the door. I cracked it and Sarah immediately yelled, "Don't come in!" and slammed the door on me before I could even react. What the hell was she doing in there? Sorry if this is too much detail, but part of me wonders if she was doing, drugs or something in there, and that's why she had become so sketchy, distant, and glued to my uncle's place. I have no idea and don't want to accuse her without evidence. Sarah doesn't have a history of anything like that. I kept making excuses for her increasingly bizarre behavior for a while, trying to rationalize it as maybe just being still really shaken up from her stepmom situation. Maybe she felt like a burden still despite my uncle's kindness, and that made her pull away, or she was just having a depressive episode, making her isolate and push me away. We all go through periods like that, right? But then she became straight up avoidant of me altogether. We used to talk or text every single day, no matter what, and over these past few weeks, almost nothing. I am lucky if I get a few texts back a day, and no real conversation, just enough to be like, "Yeah, I am still alive. Leave me alone." When I tried calling her out gently again on how distant and weird she was being, Sarah blew up at me, saying I was being paranoid and controlling and that she was under a lot of pressure that I couldn't relate to. She said if I actually trusted her, then I wouldn't be questioning her so much about what she does all day. That one really stung. Not going to lie. I do trust Sarah, or I did before all this bizarre secrecy starting building up, and I've been giving her so much space and independence to do her thing while letting her have my uncle's awesome support. But I guess she feels pushed into a corner for some reason. I'm just really confused and concerned at this point. Reddit. My once sweet, warm, loving girlfriend seems like a completely different person these days. A person who lies, hides things, lashes out, and spends pretty much every waking moment cooped up in my uncle's house. A part of me wonders if she is taking advantage of his kindness and hospitality in some way, using the house for something shady while he's not around, or maybe Uncle Marcus is the one doing something weird, and she feels forced to go along with it for a place to stay. He has always been such a good guy, but you never really know people. I am honestly at a loss here. Should I finally put my foot down and force some answers out of Sarah about what's going on? Or just be patient and see if this is a phase that passes? I care about her so much, but she's starting to feel like a stranger. What would you do? Now on to the next story. Story 8. I broke my son and his girlfriend up, and he doesn't know it was me. I broke up my son and his girlfriend. They had been dating for almost a year and seemed very happy. For backstory, my son moved out pretty soon after his biological father passed. He told me he wanted to expand on life because he was nervous he would waste it away being depressed over the death of someone so important to him. I understood completely and allowed him space and freedom, but we talked daily and he visited all the time. After a while of living alone, he moved back. It was around this time that he introduced me to Kaylee. Me and Kaylee got along immediately. She liked a mother in her life, and I think she was quick to establish the relationship with me off the bat. I noticed she was extremely paranoid and had extreme trust issues, but she wasn't toxic or manipulative, just anxious about where my son was going after work. She'd asked me, and I'd answer with, he went to his friend Mike's house. They hang out to play PlayStation with each other. We both genuinely believed that my son was at Mike's house, and we had no reason to suspect he wasn't. One night after my son came home to pick up his PS4 to hang out with Mike, Kaylee asked me to pick up some tampons and Tylenol for her. She lived close, and her periods were always super intense, so I was used to going out late into the night to help her. My son gets out of work at 4 p.m. and is usually home or at Kaylee's place by 5:30 p.m., 6 p.m. at the latest. It was 6, and he hadn't swung by to drop off his PS4. So I shot him a text before I left the house to let him know why I was gone. It was something like, hey, Kaylee is on her period, so I'm heading out to grab supplies. You okay? He answered me while I was driving, and I checked it when I got to the store. It was something like, yeah, I'm fine. Mike needed help building a shelf he bought, so I'm staying a little later. I sent back some message saying, okay, be safe. All of that mother stuff, but I was not ready to see Mike working the cash register, smiling at me as soon as I walked in. I hadn't forgotten he worked here, but obviously figured it was his day off. I smiled back, but immediately I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he means he is building it for Mike while he works. I couldn't even think straight. I just got the tampons, some snacks, and Tylenol for Kaylee and went to the register. Mike obviously started small talk with me. Paraphrasing because my memory is bad, but it went something like this. Hi, Mrs. Last Name. Hello, Mike. How are you doing? I'm all right. Getting some supplies for my son's girlfriend. I remembered he laughed. Speaking of your son, I haven't seen him in a few weeks. I need him to give me my PS4 controller he borrowed. Can you tell him that? I felt sick again. I didn't want to put my son in the spotlight, so I didn't mention the stories my son had been feeding me. I just smiled and said, I'll let him know. I paid for my stuff and left quickly. I drove to Kaylee's house and gave her the supplies, but I didn't know what to say or how to say it. She was smiling and laughing and looked carefree. She asked me where my son was. I couldn't lie to her. So I answered honestly. I don't know. I didn't know where he was or who he was with. I just told her to call him and ask. She thanked me and I left her house. Later that night, at around 8 p.m., my son finally came home. I didn't say much to him, just asked him if he had fun. He said, "Yeah," and went to his room. I knew I had to tell Kaylee soon. After I went into my room, I called her. I informed her of what Mike had said and how late he had gotten home. She told me that he said he was home hours ago, just tired, so he wasn't going to visit. I could tell she was crying, and I asked her if she wanted me to come over. I went to her house and we talked about everything, and she told me she didn't want anything to do with him and wanted to break up with him immediately. I told her she could, and if she wanted, she could be honest and say I told her. After I comforted her for a few hours, she asked if she could still contact me even if she wasn't with my son. I said yes, but honestly, I'm hesitant about it. I love her, but it feels off to me. I would still help her though. Fast forward a few days, and my son comes crying to me that Kaylee broke up with him and isn't giving him any reason. I of course comforted him too. He said that she needed time to think about it and would tell him why when she knows what to say. For now, she is supposedly speechless. I was too, so I don't blame her. He cried for hours in his room and in my arms, and regardless of what he did, of what I did, I comforted him. I want to tell him what I know, and I feel bad that he doesn't know, but Kaylee didn't tell him anything yet, so I might wait. Honestly, I feel stuck. This isn't just about cheating, even though I think he is. This is about trust and how he is lying to me and his girlfriend. We both know there is a possibility he isn't cheating, but he shouldn't have to lie if he has nothing to hide. Did I overstep my boundaries, or did I do the right thing? To be honest, I'm not sure. What are all of your thoughts? I broke my son and his girlfriend up, and he doesn't know it was me. Part 2. I wasn't going to make an update for a few days or weeks, but I took some advice from messages I got. I just wanted to clear a few things up. First, I gave my son space and freedom, but I wanted him to be able to take time for me entirely if he wished. Throughout his teen years, whenever he was upset, he would ask me to leave him alone. I would oblige, but honestly, if he didn't speak to me for more than 3 days, I would just ask if he was okay. After his biological father died, I told him he could have a break from talking if he wanted, and I would wait for the okay to contact him. The break only lasted for maybe a week, and he wanted to call me and visit. For the actual update, Kaylee decided to give him a call. She talked things out with her sister and decided to ask him. Apparently he was cheating, but told her that it was because she was on her period and very sensitive to everything. He said he had done it 3 other times, all while she is on her period. She called me and told me before my son told me, but in his defense, he was busy explaining things to his girlfriend, and now Michael, he accidentally wrapped into this. It's only 12 in the afternoon, and he wants to tell me in detail after work, which I told him was okay. He told me he was sorry for lying, and I told him it was okay, but it hurt my feelings. I didn't mention this in the post or to him, but his biological dad cheated on me, and that is why we are apart. He cheated on me before I was pregnant with my son, and for the first year of our marriage, I did not want my son to think that was okay. I talked to Kaylee, and she is just head over heels for my son and said if he promises not to do it again, she would stay with him. I haven't told him that because that is not my business. They can talk about that. My son has sent me a few messages since about work, but he seems extremely sorry. I am a bit disappointed in him, but I think it's because of what I went through and how hard being a single mother after the man you thought loved you just left. Kaylee said that she would try to be a more attentive girlfriend, which honestly sucks to hear because this is not her fault. I am not going to dictate their relationship and tell her to find someone else, but it does shock me that she can forgive. As much as I want to be mad at my son, I really can't. I've never gotten mad at him before, and I think this situation just brought me back to everything that happened when he was little. I hope my son can learn from this. Tonight when we talk, I'm going to be a little strict on him, obviously, but again, he is an adult. If he says he is going to cheat on her, I cannot stop him. I really hope he learns. Now on to the next story. Story 9. An entitled parent literally murdered someone. I always thought these crazy people who don't mind their own business must be a rare breed and that I would never encounter one. But somehow I did. So, a little bit of background before I start. I was born in Pakistan but came to Canada when I was 3. But by that time I could already speak Urdu, Punjabi, and Hindi. The languages are fairly similar in many regards, and then I came to Canada and English was my 4th language. As I grew up, I also learned Arabic, French, and Japanese to varying competencies, but all within the realm of conversation. Having grown up in Canada, I have no accent when I speak English, so you wouldn't be able to tell me apart from a Caucasian person if you spoke with me over the phone. But also, having learned so many languages, I'm able to pronounce a lot of sounds fairly accurately, so I sound authentic in all languages that I speak in to all but native speakers. Most of the languages that I know sound different enough from each other that someone that doesn't know them can still tell that the language is different. I've traveled back home to Pakistan a few times, and I would always encounter those beggars who come with elaborate stories like, "My wife is sick and she needs surgery, and I managed to get money for that, but I need money for the flight to reach her," etc. I came up with a fun counter to that, which was that I would act like I didn't understand them at all and would start speaking in a different language that they wouldn't know. Japanese was my go-to language while in Pakistan. The reaction those people would have was quite hilarious. The cast of this story is Karen, the star of the show, Jimmy, Karen's husband and a decent human being, Zuraf, me, wifey, my wife, and the restaurant manager. So, my wife and I were at an Indian restaurant in Edmonton, Canada, enjoying our dinner and having a conversation. We speak a mix of Urdu and English, just mixing with whatever feels easy to someone listening in. They would be able to understand enough to figure out what we were talking about in most cases. We were sitting in a booth table, so it was only open from one side. Karen and her family, Jimmy and her two daughters that looked like they were in their early teens, were sitting at an open table with an empty table between us. My wife is Pakistani like me, and what some Pakistanis like to do is eat rice with their hands. I prefer a spoon myself, but at this time my wife was eating with her hands. Apparently, this Karen got offended at seeing my wife eat with her hands. When she came over, I started speaking in different languages, acting like I didn't understand what she was saying in English. I'll translate what I said and put in parentheses which language I said it in. Here's how it went down. Karen walks over to our table with a sour expression on her face. Jimmy calls to her, telling her to sit back down and leave us alone, but she ignored him. She addresses my wife directly. "What's wrong with you? Can't you eat your food in a civilized manner like the rest of us?" I say in Urdu, "Huh? What do you want? Can't you see we're eating?" Karen looks at me with surprise. "What did you just say?" I say in Urdu to my wife, "Don't talk to her in English. Just do what I'm doing." And I say to Karen, "You're just a crazy woman. Go sit back down. Why aren't you speaking in English?" My wife starts smiling, and I try hard to keep a straight face. My wife says in Urdu, "We are just enjoying our meal. Why don't you go and sit down? I just heard you speaking in English. I know you can talk in English." "Yeah, I can, but I choose to not do so." I think she is getting upset. I know that's what makes this so much fun. "Stop it. Talk in English like I heard you before." I say in Japanese, "So you're listening in on a conversation. Don't you have any manners?" "Wait, that's some other language now. What the heck is this?" Jimmy says, "Leave them alone, Karen. They don't speak English." "I know they do. They're just pretending not to. It doesn't matter. Just sit down." I saw her waving to a waiter table. "That's right. Go back to your table, you loud cow. Karen, they aren't doing anything wrong. Leave them alone. She's eating with her hands. I can't let the girls learn her uncivilized ways." I say to my wife in Hindi, "Start licking your fingers." My wife starts licking the rice off her right hand, off the top parts of her fingers, and that makes Karen rage even more. "Oh my God. Look at how gross she's being. Stop looking at her. If you don't like it," then I say in Arabic, "Hey, you dumb jerk. Do you behave this way everywhere you go?" He changed languages again and again. I know he did. His accent changed. I say in Japanese, "Yep, and I can keep changing. Speak in English. You must have heard them wrong. They don't know English. Leave them alone then. Why are they living here? They don't deserve to live here if they don't know English." I was having a hard time keeping a straight face, so I disguised it by raising my voice and appearing angry. I gestured towards her and then pointed at our table. "Are you so dumb you can't even listen to your husband? Go sit down and stop embarrassing yourself. You don't deserve to be here. Get out." At this point, the restaurant manager shows up and sees what all the commotion was about. He's an Indian guy with a pretty heavy accent when he spoke in English, so I knew he'd speak either Hindi or Punjabi. "Excuse me, can you please keep your voice down? What's going on here? This woman is eating with their hands, and it's disgusting. She's corrupting my children with her barbaric ways. Ma'am, there are no rules that forbid her from eating with her hands. Please leave them alone, or I'll have to ask you to leave now." Jimmy gets up and comes over to her. Karen says, "Sit down, Karen. You've embarrassed yourself enough. This is why I can't take you anywhere." I say in Punjabi, "Ignore this dumb cow, or her brain is smaller than a lao, an Indian sweet." The manager starts laughing at my comment, and Karen gets even redder in the face since she probably thinks we were making fun of her. "Oh, if you should go back to your country." Jimmy just takes her arm and leads her back to their table and sits her down, telling her to shut up. Her daughters look like they want to sink into the floor from embarrassment. I ramble a few more sentences in varying languages as a kind of venting before my wife tells me to just leave it alone. We finish our dinner about 10 minutes later with Karen glaring at us the whole time. I go pay the bill, and as we are walking out of the restaurant, we pass near Karen's table. I call out to Jimmy in perfect English with no accent while smiling and give him a wave. "Hey, buddy, I hope you enjoy your dinner. Have a good night." Karen's eyes bulge as she screams, "Oh, I knew it. See, they know English." She tried to stand up suddenly, but instead ended up falling over backward. My wife and I left the restaurant laughing before she could do anything else. Wow, what kind of person goes to an ethnic restaurant and then yells at people there for eating ethnic food in the ethnic style and then speaking the ethnic language? Now on to the next story. Story 10. My entitled mother demanded I hand over my house to her because my little sister is pregnant and needs it more than me. I, 31M, have a sister, 28F, that has honestly been the golden child to my mother, but not my father, for as long as I can remember. My parents divorced when I was a teenager because my mother cheated with an old high school ex-boyfriend and has always been controlling, manipulative, and narcissistic. And sadly, my sister was like her little mini-me. Our mother also seemed to believe she had total authority over me. Anytime she so much as snapped her fingers, she'd snap them and order me around like a dog. It was demeaning, and my sister always backed her up too. So no surprise I went to live with my dad full-time after our parents split while my sister stayed with mom. The two of them were very alike and both pretty much stopped speaking with my father unless it was about money. Though I'm more like my dad. My father was very business-oriented and started teaching me how to do his line of work as soon as I was 16. I got pretty good at it, and after 12 years of working for my father, I was made a partner in his company. Things were great, but then about 8 months ago, tragedy struck. My father had become somewhat immunocompromised due to being a heavy smoker for much of his life and died at 60 years old after he caught C-19. I met my mother and sister for the first time in years after we had a socially distanced funeral for my father over video call. My father was cremated by his own request and buried in a local cemetery, so there was no body or casket. My sister seemed to grieve, but my mother looked indifferent the entire time, though I honestly was not surprised. The last time she saw my father, she screamed at him that he owed her more money and then threatened to sue him, to which he just laughed at her. He paid alimony and child support as long as he was legally mandated to, and no more than that. And he even put $30,000 toward my sister's college fund, but 10 years after the divorce, he was no longer legally required to send mom money anymore because of the judge's ruling. And she's by no means broke. She works the same job she has had for nearly 3 decades, fully owns the old family home we used to share, and even rents out 2 of the rooms in it to Airbnb regularly. She's by no means hurting for money. Sometime after the funeral, my dad's will was read. Apparently, he'd figured that if his heavy smoking didn't eventually do him in, something else would, and even joked about it in a pre-recorded video. I was pretty much willed nearly all of his assets. For most of his money to his business and home, he left my sister a car, a 2015 Nissan Altima, and about $10,000 in cash. My mother only got $1,000 and a few other items that she'd been claiming were rightfully hers since the divorce. Beyond that, I got the rest, and my girlfriend now lives with me in the house my father passed down to me. My sister pretty much went from finishing 2 years of community college to living off her boyfriend and only working part-time online for several years. And during that time, she got pregnant but suffered a traumatic miscarriage. I wasn't aware until after the funeral because we were practically no contact, and no one else told me. When lockdown hit, her boyfriend's job started downsizing little by little, and eventually he was only able to stay on part-time, which hampered hers and his finances to the point he was finally telling her she needed to look for better employment as well since he was trying to find a second job. And then she got pregnant. She claims she and her BF were careful but calls it her miracle baby. One evening, I got an unexpected knock at my door, and when I answered, I was unpleasantly greeted by both my mother and sister. They both walked right in without even asking and made themselves comfortable in my living room. My girlfriend and I shared a look of confusion, and I asked why they'd come by. My sister was giggling and looking all over, opening doors, and seemingly giving herself a tour of my home. My mother had just plopped herself down on my sofa and snapped her fingers while demanding a cold bottled water. My GF got the water for her, and I asked what they were here for. My sister seemed all giddy and just ignored me to continue snooping around my home. And before long, I heard her yell from down the hall, "Mommy, it's perfect." Yes, she still calls her mommy. My mother finally spoke up and said, "Well, I think it's time to ditch your brotherly duty." To which I was like, "What?" My mother then proceeded to say, "Now that your father has passed, this house should have gone to me since I was his only spouse, but you can still fix this. You make plenty of money and could just buy a new house. Your sister needs this one so much more since she's the one with a baby on the way. But if you're so determined on staying, you could just keep to one room and cover all of the bills until you decide to move out." My GF and I read enough Reddit to know exactly where this is going and how it'd play out if I let it go on, so I guess you could say we were mentally prepared. I took a deep breath and stated aloud, "That's not happening. You don't order me around, especially not in my own goddamn home. Yes, I make plenty of money, but like Dad, I'm gonna save it for when I really need it, not that you care." My mother started snapping her fingers at me like she used to and loudly stated, "Stop! I am your mother, and you will do as I say because I brought you into this world, and I'm the one in charge here. And as far as you're concerned, I am God. That means when I say jump, you say how high. This house is rightfully mine, and your sister will live here. Consider this your formal eviction, but since I'm gracious, I'll give you 2 weeks to pack your bags and transfer the deed to me." In the back of my mind, I'm thinking this can't be real, but then I just grabbed my cell phone and started dialing. My mother quickly stood up and yelled, "What are you doing?" And I retorted, "I'm doing what I should have done as soon as this started. I'm calling the cops to get you out of my house." She started swiping at me and managed to knock my phone out of my hands. Then she proceeded to try and stomp on it, but I was quick enough to snatch it up before she could. "That's it. If you don't leave, I will force you out myself." My mother proceeded to slap me across the face, and I returned the favor twice as hard, backhanded. So much so I ended up knocking her back down onto the couch. She held her hand over her reddening and smeared makeup face in total shock and then yelled, "How dare you!" I went back to dialing on my phone and said that if she didn't leave, I would have police come and remove her by force. My sister came barreling in between us, holding her arms out and saying that I should just do the right thing for once in my life and be a good big brother. I snapped and said, "Oh, really? I'm the bad sibling. Last I checked, I was the one who's had to work for a living since I was a teenager. I had to do all the chores in the house while you just sat on your ass playing video games or talking with your friends all day. And you used to steal my hard-earned money just to go out shopping after you spend all of your allowance. You're a complete mooch and thief, so I don't owe you now. Both of you get out before I decide to dial this last number." My sister started to tear up, crying like a baby, and said, "Mommy, make him stop." My mother began hugging her and kissing her cheeks while giving me a death glare. Then she seemed to think she'd gotten smart and said, "You know, if you do call the police, I can just tell them that you hit me, and who knows, I could maybe say to everyone you wanted to do a lot worse to a poor pregnant girl in need. I don't think that it'd be a very good thing for you." I cut her off with a raised hand and said, "Just stop. If you haven't noticed, my girlfriend over there has had her phone out recording almost this whole time, and that means we have recorded evidence of you assaulting me first and openly stating you'd lie to police. I don't think that it'd be so good for your reputation at your job or your little Airbnb. If looks could kill, my mother would have blown me up like a tactical nuke, but she quickly deflated and started dragging my crying sister out by the arm. My sister was somehow acting like a complete toddler and broke loose of our mother's grip to sit down on my porch step and have a tantrum. I just gave my mother a look and said, "Do you see now? This is the result of the spoiled way you raised her." She glared at me again, and then I was treated to a show of my mother trying to drag my sister off of my porch steps, but she latched onto the porch handrails and kept saying, "You promised me," over and over again. I let out a cackle and told them both from the door to never come back. My mother flipped me the bird and then went back to trying to drag my sister off the porch. It took a few minutes, but she finally got my sister to get up and leave with her by saying, "I'm a cruel, heartless bastard who will go to hell for this." I laughed some more and said that there's also a special place in hell for liars and narcissists who try to manipulate others to get their way. My mother clenched her fists and was about to say more when I just held up my smartphone again with it recording and said, "The clock is ticking, Mom. Get off my property." My mother then walked my sister to the car, gave me one last snooty look, and drove off. I thought that was the end of it, but letting things go was never something my mother would do. After a few days, I started getting messages from people I know and some relatives online. A lot of them were furious with me, but others just had questions about what was going on. I tried to check my FB but couldn't see anything they were saying because my sister and mother both blocked me on their social media, but my girlfriend could still see everything because they kept their profile set to open. We screenshotted everything and then printed some of it out. Both of their profiles had posts that called me a greedy, heartless bastard who stole the house that was meant to be my sister's inheritance right out from under her by paying off the lawyer who handled Dad's will, which is a complete and utter lie, and they both know it. I called my lawyer, who was also my father's lawyer and a trusted family friend, and gave him copies of all the screenshots from FB and the video my girlfriend had recorded the day my mother demanded my house. He wanted to just write a formal C&D, but I wanted to take it further than that, and he sent them a letter I told him to write via express mail that had to be signed for, so I know they got it. My mother called me in an absolute fury the same day the letter was delivered. I told her that if she and my sister didn't redact all of the untrue social media posts they made about me and tell the absolute truth, I'd send all of the information I have to the whole family, her boss, and upload the videos we'd recorded of her online. And then I'd sue her on top of it. She called me unreasonable and that she just did what she did for my sister's sake, and then went into a full-blown lecture reiterating her belief that my sister still needs my house more than me. I bluntly stated I didn't care what she thought, and if she didn't redact everything and tell the truth, I'd make sure her career would be over. She begrudgingly said, "Fine, you win. Have it your way and keep the house," before hanging up the phone. That very evening, all of the lying posts disappeared from both their profiles. I was unblocked, and my mother gave me and everyone a half-assed apology, claiming she jumped the gun with everything she said because she thought my sister needed my house more than me because she's broke and pregnant. But the house was rightfully mine according to my father's will, and she knew that even before my father passed away, so she had no right to try and claim it. As for my sister, she also apologized, but more or less just parroted everything our mother said while claiming she just went along with her ideas, and then she blamed what she did all on her mother and her pregnancy hormones. The replies poured in for some time on both my mother and sister's profiles. Many were furious with them for trying to take my house. I got a lot of messages of sorries and my bads from those who'd previously believed her, but all it really did was show me who was more on her side to begin with, since they were all believing her nonsense so quickly. They were mostly people from her side of the family anyway. No one on my father's side believed her at all and openly said so. My sister and her boyfriend ended up moving in with her mother to save money, but she put them in the basement to keep her Airbnb running, and my sister started crying on social media that she can't live upstairs. And I'm pretty sure the two of them were fighting with each other because all my sister did after that is complain online, and my mother barely posted anything on her SM anymore because of the previous stunt she tried. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.